Hello and welcome to my presentation about PEPPOL at the NHS, what stakeholders and suppliers need to know and plan for. I'm Ger Clancy from IBM. So in our agenda we're going to look at the IBM NHS PEPPOL team, the existing trading environment at the NHS compared to the PEPPOL environment, the electronic document formats that are brought in with the NHS PEPPOL interaction. Then we'll have a look at it from the other side of the picture, what suppliers get from PEPPOL, as well as internationally procurement, and finally why IBM and what next. So here at the bottom you see the existing IBM healthcare extended team, and you may be familiar with some of these colleagues. Their interaction will be unchanged by this, and at the top you've got the NHS PEPPOL core team, and that's Aideen Ryan, Stefan Mortensen, Søren Christensen, and myself, Ger Clancy. And the lead on the IBM NHS project is Aideen Ryan, and you can reach any of us via obviously our phone numbers here, or via our IBM home pages that you see the links to. So let's look now at the existing trading environment in the NHS. Lots of manual orders, little automation, and tools not integrated. So you have the NHS trusts, you have your suppliers. Some of the NHS trusts connected to Oracle service providers, others not. And then you have a lot of one-to-one interactions between suppliers and trusts. And then smaller suppliers and lots of individual interactions there. The interactions could be via some electronic formats, some will be only on paper-based or fax or email, phone, basically traditional trade. But very little flexibility and very little scope for consolidation and savings. Moving forward to PEPPOL, again you have your three NHS trusts here, two connected to Oracle, one not. And you introduce the PEPPOL environment. So the Oracle service provider has linked into a PEPPOL gateway, as has the NHS Trust. And actually, it doesn't matter with PEPPOL which gateway you choose. They both don't have to use the same one. It could just as easily have been any of the PEPPOL gateways shown here. It simply doesn't matter. The main feature of PEPPOL is that it's service provider agnostic, so that you can have two completely and even competing service providers on either side of the transaction, and what they're doing is they're providing service to their client, but from the point of view of getting of the dependencies, the client on either side, or the whole transaction is not dependent upon the relationship with one with one service provider. So if we add in the suppliers, then they connect again to a service provider of their choice, and as they do, they're able then to interact with the NHS bodies, either via Oracle or not, and also with each other in the same manner. And the smaller trading partners likewise pick a service provider of their choice, and as they do, they also gain access to both the NHS destinations via Oracle and not, to the larger businesses and to the smaller businesses. So with one connection they gain access to everything. If we look then at the path of a message from the NHS here to the Oracle provider, into the PEPPOL gateway, across the PEPPOL network, out at the other side, into the supplier, and then the route back. And as well, you have the possibility, this is going via the Oracle provider, so we have the possibility of integrating PEPPOL at ERP level with Oracle, also with SAP and other ERP systems. So this can just as easily then be at a supplier end using SAP. With PEPPOL integration, they would raise the order directly in their SAP environment, send it out through PEPPOL, and it's received into NHS, into Oracle, and returned. So then if you look at the NHS trust that's not connected to Oracle, the path is slightly shorter for them because they go then directly to the PEPPOL gateway. But what happens if they decide then to join up with an Oracle provider? So they make the connection to the Oracle provider, the message then goes via Oracle, and actually the requirement for the direct connection from that trust then to the PEPPOL gateway is removed, so they don't need that anymore. Now, looking at, I'm sorry, this is then the situation where you connect once to PEPPOL and you can communicate everywhere. So all PEPPOL-enabled entities have access to all other enabled entities on the PEPPOL network. Let's look at the documents now and the document formats within PEPPOL which the NHS will be using. So that will be the purchase order, obviously going from the NHS to the supplier, then the invoice returning, a credit note in the case of returns, and the advanced shipping notification. There are some other PEPPOL standardized documents but that are out of scope for the NHS project, but which suppliers may use, like for instance catalogues. But let's say that's going to be more within the scope of the GS1 remit, and I won't be dealing with it today. And obviously all of this interaction here is underlined with the AS2 security, which is the standard protocol now, the minimum standard protocol for PEPPOL use. So if we turn things on their head now, what will a supplier say when they're told, hey, it's time for you now to get with PEPPOL? And their first question will be, what's in it for me? So let's look at the world out of the eyes of the commercial sector and PEPPOL. So historically, you've got your large companies at the top, your smaller business here at the bottom, and it would be a fairly common practice historically for larger businesses to make a strategic decision that they're going to adopt electronic trade and mandate that all of their trading partners have to use a particular platform or particular trade format or process in order to continue to be able to trade with them. And certainly what that will do is reduced cost and complexity for the larger company, but it ends up forcing a lot of that cost and complexity down the line onto the smaller partner. So at the bottom of the picture here, you've got a smaller company that's trading with 5 larger companies via 4 connections across on the right hand side, completely by accident. It just happened that 2 of the larger bodies happen to be using the same service provider, and then you see the service provider 5 and 7 at the bottom. Some of those trade links need to happen also through multiple hops, so that we may need multiple providers to be involved in order to reach the goal. But from the point of view of the smaller trader, they need to have individual, possibly login details or individual processes worked out for each time they need to interact with this particular larger trading partner. And that's obviously completely irrespective of the rest of their business, which they would then probably do through traditional methods, paper, fax, email, and so on. Now, if you overlay then the PEPPOL environment on this, the main thing about the PEPPOL environment, as I've mentioned before, it's access points, it's provider agnostic. So you see here the smaller trader connects to a PEPPOL gateway, and as I play through the animation, you see the silos that were between, the walls, the silos that were between the larger companies have now come down as they individually connect to a PEPPOL gateway of their choice. Some of them have retained the service provider that they had previously because that provider can also provide PEPPOL access. Others have changed providers as best suited them. So you now have the way where all of the entities shown can trade obviously with the smaller partner, which was maybe their initial goal, but then in the same manner they can also trade with each other, which is really the added benefit, because you would find probably that a lot of these other companies would have been trading with each other anyway, but possibly via either the same enforced electronic methods or paper, fax, email, and so on, without a chance really of simplifying and consolidating and saving. So by this connecting once, you get the benefit of all of that synergy all at once. So now, moving forward, then you see well, I said the PEPPOL entities can trade in the network. What happens if you want to add in additional trading partners? So be that then either public or commercial. Effectively, you need them, or they need to get access to a PEPPOL service provider, to a PEPPOL gateway, which is their own responsibility. And once they do, they have access again to each other, to everyone else on the network. And if you come along with a new client that's not yet PEPPOL enabled, perhaps they do have still a PEPPOL connection, a legacy EDI connection, which can be used while the PEPPOL connection is being set up. Once PEPPOL is active, however, then the need for that kind of peer-to-peer connection is no longer needed. So let's have a look now at PEPPOL in international trade. You see here I would say a traditional business-to-business electronic trade relationship. And let's have a look now what happens if you want to add in a different country. So historically, probably the most common way of doing this would have been via a daisy chain of VANS providers, which would have bounced along the message from one to another, from the initial provider to the nearest one in the chain that can reach the end customer or the end point. An expensive and fragile enough environment, and obviously as well something which doesn't necessarily guarantee that the message will always get through. The alternative to that would have been using a closed trading platform. Definitely has advantages over the daisy chain, but the disadvantage is that it forces the entities at both sides to have a restrictive contractual connection with that one service provider, which causes then huge dependency because their trade is completely locked into the service provider. So let's look at PEPPOL now. You have here the PEPPOL gateways, the trading entities at either side choose a PEPPOL service provider, a PEPPOL gateway of their choice, and connect and have access then to each other. But then they also have access to other, be it public or commercial sector bodies, either at home or in other countries, commercial and public. And every time an endpoint is added, everybody on the network still then can begin to trade also with that endpoint once they want, as they want to, without any additional costs. So you have then as again, connect once, communicate everywhere. This becomes much more flexible, much less complex, and above all, much cheaper than previously. And regarding the dependence, each endpoint on the PEPPOL network chooses the service provider that best suits their requirements. That could easily be the same provider as is giving access to their trading partner, or it can be a different service provider. It just doesn't matter. So, why IBM? Well, since 2008, IBM has been involved in the PEPPOL project. However, going back already to 2004, IBM was involved in the UBL technology, which is what then later became known as PEPPOL. And we have a track record as a PEPPOL service provider. We would also then use PEPPOL heavily internally for our own billing our own corporate customers. In Scandinavia, in particular, we also act as a reseller of PEPPOL service for smaller service providers. That's not yet the case in the UK, although we have had discussions with a number of smaller electronic commerce providers that are interested in that conversation with us. And we also act as a PEPPOL consultant. So for argument's sake, at the end of last year, beginning of 2014, we were involved in advising the Russian Federation on how to set up a PEPPOL access point of their own for their own trade purposes. So we would have very deep experience in PEPPOL implementations from the smallest to the largest, from SMB through multinational, government and country level. Also a very important thing is the Open PEPPOL group effectively owns the PEPPOL technology on behalf of the European Commission, and the only commercial sector member of the board of management of Open PEPPOL is an IBMer, Niels P. Rasmussen, who's the executive architect in our e-commerce center in Denmark. So we're at the end of the presentation. What next? As I said at the beginning, Aideen Ryan will be leading the IBM NHS PEPPOL project, and you have her phone number here and the link to her IBM homepage, and you can instant message her from there as shown in the screenshot, and that's probably the best way to reach her fastest. Beyond that, what is needed to get a quotation for provision of PEPPOL service? And this is pretty much the same for either an NHS or a commercial sector customer. We need to look at, firstly, are there existing electronic document formats that you currently use and wish to continue to use in tandem with PEPPOL? And that's just looking at that, and if there's a question of requiring to program translation or mapping of one format to another. Then we need to have a look at the monthly anticipated volume of transactions. And finally, if you plan to use ERP, Oracle, SAP integration, which ERP provider, which ERP release, and those are the key things that we would need then to come up with a proposal for provision of PEPPOL service. So that was my presentation for today. Thank you for your attention. I'm Ger Clancy from IBM. My contact details are at the beginning of the presentation, and please feel free to contact either myself or Aideen or any of the other colleagues that I've shown earlier if you've got any further questions, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.